The sea has a name, but on certain nights the name feels wrong. The Sea of Galilee, 13 miles long, 8 miles wide, framed on all sides by hills that funnel the wine down from the Golan Heights like a hand squeezing a throat. Professional fishermen have drowned on this water. Men who knew every current shift, every color the sky could turn before the weather changed. They knew, and they still drowned. On this particular night, the sky has gone black in the wrong way. There are 13 men in the boat. 12 of them are moving, bailing, pulling ropes, screaming at each other over the sound of the waves. The 13th is asleep. He is asleep on a cushion in the stern. His name is Jesus of Nazareth, carpenter's son, rabbi, 32 years old, give or take. And he is asleep while the boat is going under. Peter, Simon Peter, who has fished this lake since he was old enough to hold a net, who knows exactly what a storm like this does to a boat like this, grabs him by the shoulder. Teacher, don't you care that we are dying? That question is not a theological statement. That question is raw terror wearing words. And here is what you need to know before we go any further. One night, in a garden on the other side of this story, a man will sweat drops of blood. Medical literature calls this condition hematidrosis, when extreme psychological distress causes the capillaries around the sweat glands to burst. It happens to soldiers the night before battle. It happens to people facing execution. It leaves the skin raw. It is the body's signal that fear has reached its outer limit. And that same man asleep on the cushion, will be the one it happens to. We will get to that garden. We will get to what he does there, and why it answers every question in this video. But not yet. Because right now, we are on a boat, and the water is coming in. This is not a video about positive thinking. This is not a video about breathing techniques, or journaling, or any of the 10,000 self-help systems designed to paper over the oldest wound in human experience. This is not a video about telling yourself that everything is going to be okay. This is a video about a cure. A specific, surprising, documented cure, tested under conditions far worse than anything you and I will likely face. And it begins on a sinking boat, in the middle of the night, with a man who is somehow asleep. Jesus stands up. He doesn't reach for a rope. He doesn't grab an oar. He doesn't brace against the mast. He turns to face the wind and the water, and he speaks to them. Peace, be still. And they obey. Not gradually. Not over the next hour as the storm naturally passes. The Greek text of Mark's Gospel uses a word that means instantaneous. The wind drops to nothing. The waves flatten. The surface of the Sea of Galilee goes smooth as a floor. And in the silence, Jesus turns to the 12 men staring at him and asks the most disorienting question imaginable. Why are you afraid? Here's what most people miss about that moment. He doesn't say, good news, the storm is gone, you can relax now. He doesn't validate their fear as understandable given the circumstances. He asks them why it was there in the first place. As if the storm was not actually the problem. As if something was already broken before the clouds rolled in. The historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, described the Sea of Galilee storms as sudden and violent. Warm air from the Jordan Rift Valley slamming into cold air from the Golan Heights, generating waves that could overturn a fishing vessel in under 3 minutes. Peter and Andrew were professional fishermen. They had worked this water since childhood. They knew what this kind of storm meant. And they still panicked. Jesus knew that too. He was not surprised by their fear. He was pointing at something underneath it. A fault line deeper than the weather. "O you of little faith," he says. And that phrase, in the Greek, oligopistoi, doesn't mean, you faithless cowards. It means something closer to, your faith is there, but it is small right now. A pilot light, not an inferno. Enough to survive on. Not yet enough to stand on. The cure had started. They didn't know it yet. But it gets stranger. A few days later, on the other side of that same sea, Jesus steps out of a boat and walks into a graveyard. This is not a metaphor. There is a man who lives in the tombs outside the city of Gerasa. He has lived there for, the text doesn't specify, long enough that the locals have tried to chain him and failed. Long enough that he cuts himself with stones in the night. Long enough that nobody comes near anymore. The townspeople have done what people do with suffering they cannot fix. They have built a wall around it and learned not to look. His name, when Jesus asks, is Legion. Because the voices inside him are not one, but many. The text says as many as 2,000. Whatever is happening to this man, it has taken everything. His home, his name, his ability to be touched by another human being. He lives in the place where the dead are laid, because the living cannot hold him. He is the most fear-saturated person in the four Gospels. Not afraid of something external, destroyed from the inside. And Jesus walks toward him, not around him, not cautiously, directly toward a man who breaks chains, who screams in the night, who the entire region has learned to avoid. And when the man sees Jesus coming, he does something that has always stopped me cold when I read it. He runs to meet him. After all that isolation, after all those years of being the thing people fled from, some part of him, some surviving fragment of the person buried under legion, runs toward the only one who came. What happens next is violent and disorienting and not the point of this section. The point is what comes after. The townspeople come out to see what happened, and they find the man, seated, clothed, in his right mind, talking calmly with Jesus. The text says they were afraid. Not the man who had been legion. The townspeople, the ones who had never been chained, never lived in the tombs, never cut themselves with stones. They looked at a man restored to full humanity, and they were afraid. He asked Jesus if he could come with him. Jesus told him to go home instead. Go back to your people. Tell them what happened. He went, and he told everyone. And the text says they were all amazed. The cure doesn't require you to have your life together first. It doesn't require courage or the right theology or a clean track record. The most broken man in the Gospels found it in a graveyard, running toward the only one who didn't run away. Stay with me. There is a woman in this same chapter, Mark chapter 5, who has been bleeding for 12 years. 12 years of doctors who took her money and made her worse. 12 years of being untouchable under Levitical law, the same law that governed her entire community, her family, her synagogue. You could not touch her without becoming ceremonially unclean yourself, which meant, in practical terms, that for 12 years no one had touched her at all. She heard Jesus was passing through. She didn't approach him directly. She couldn't. The crowd was too thick, and she was not supposed to be in a crowd. She was not supposed to be touching anyone, brushing against anyone. Every step she took through that press of bodies was technically illegal under the code she had grown up inside. She knew it. She pushed through anyway. She reached out and touched the hem of his garment, just the edge of the cloth, the fringe of his robe, and the bleeding stopped. 12 years. Gone. Jesus stopped walking. He turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garment?" The disciples looked at him like he'd lost his mind. There were hundreds of people pressing in from every direction. He said, "Someone touched me. I felt power go out." She came forward, fell at his feet, told him everything. And he said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Be healed of your suffering." Daughter, not woman, not you there. Daughter, the most intimate term of address he could have chosen. For a person who had spent 12 years being made to feel like a problem. Here is what I need you to see about her story. She did not conquer her fear before she reached. The text says she came trembling. She pushed through that crowd while she was afraid. She touched his robe while her hands were shaking. She told him everything while she was still on the ground. The cure was not on the other side of her fear. The cure was in the reaching, through the fear, toward him. That is the pattern. It has appeared 3 times now. The disciples on the boat were afraid. Jesus asked why, and then the calm came. The man in the tombs was destroyed by what lived inside him. He ran toward Jesus anyway, and then the restoration came. The woman with 12 years of suffering was afraid to be seen. She reached anyway, and then the healing came. The move is not, stop being afraid, then act. The move is, reach while afraid. 3 stories. 3 different kinds of fear. A storm that came from outside. A destruction that came from within. A suffering that came from a body that wouldn't stop breaking down. And in all 3, the same pattern. Not courage first, then Christ. Christ first, then courage. Not freedom from fear as the prerequisite. Freedom from fear as the result. We are halfway through this video. And if what you're seeing here is landing for you, if you've ever been on a boat going under, or lived in a kind of tomb you couldn't name, or reached for something while your hands were shaking, then you are exactly who this channel exists for. Hit subscribe if you haven't. It costs you nothing. And it means the next time we go deep on something like this, you'll actually be there for it. And before we go into the second half, I want to ask you something in the comments. Which of those three stories hit you hardest? The storm, the graveyard, the woman in the crowd? Tell me below. I read every comment. I want to know where you are in this. Because the next story we're about to look at is different from those three. Those three, the fear came suddenly. What's next is slower. It's the kind of fear that builds while you wait. While nothing happens. While heaven appears to be silent. That one might be the most dangerous kind of all. There is a man named Lazarus who lives in a village called Bethany, 2 miles outside Jerusalem. He has 2 sisters, Mary and Martha, and he has a friend, a close one. The kind of friend the Gospel of John goes out of its way to describe. Chapter 11, verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. The text doesn't say that about many people by name. It says it here, deliberately. Lazarus gets sick. His sisters send word to Jesus immediately. The message is simple and devastating in equal measure. Lord, the one you love is sick. They don't ask for anything specific. They don't need to. They assume that love means speed. They assume that a friend who can heal strangers will certainly come running for the friend he loves. Jesus receives the message. He reads it. And he stays where he is for 2 more days. Not because he didn't care. Not because he was busy. John's gospel tells us he stayed on purpose. This illness does not lead to death, he tells his disciples. It is for the glory of God. And then Lazarus dies. Mary and Martha don't know the second half of that sentence. All they know is that they sent for their friend. And their friend didn't come, and now their brother is in a tomb, and the stone is rolled across the entrance. And the body has been there 4 days, and the smell has started. When Jesus finally arrives, Martha walks out to meet him on the road. She doesn't break down. She says something that sounds composed on the surface and is absolutely not. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. This sentence has a hidden edge to it. You hear it if you read slowly. If you had been here. You weren't. And this is where it gets remarkable. Jesus doesn't defend the delay. He doesn't explain his reasoning. He doesn't say, Martha, trust me, I had a plan. He looks at her and says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. Do you believe this? He gives her something to stand on before he shows her anything. Then Mary comes. She falls at his feet. She says the same words Martha said. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Same sentence. Different woman. Same wound. And Jesus weeps. The Greek word is edakrusin. He shed tears. Not wept loudly, not broke down. Tears. Quiet, specific, personal grief. Standing at the tomb of his friend. Knowing full well what he is about to do, he cries anyway. Because the grief of the people he loves is not abstract to him. Because Mary is on the ground, and that matters, even when he knows the ending. Some of the people standing nearby said, See how he loved him. Others said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? That second question is the one fear always asks. Not just then. Now. Could you not have prevented this? Were you not paying attention? Did you not care enough to move? The Greek word Paul uses in Philippians chapter 4 for anxiety is merimneo, and it means, literally, to have a divided mind. To be pulled in 2 directions at once. Between what is real right now and what might happen next. Between what you can see and what you cannot control. A mind split down the middle, spinning between the present and the feared future. Martha and Mary were merimneo for 4 days. Watching their brother die, waiting for a friend who didn't come. That slow, grinding, hope-deferred fear, the kind that doesn't explode all at once like a storm, but builds and builds and builds, until it becomes the only thing you can feel. Augustine of Hippo wrote about this same condition in his Confessions, around 397 AD, more than 3 centuries after Lazarus was buried. Our heart is restless, he wrote, until it repose in thee. Not our circumstances, our heart. The restlessness is not caused by the situation. The situation just exposes it. What Jesus does next at the tomb is important. But what he does before the tomb matters more. He gives Martha a truth to hold. He weeps with Mary where she has fallen. He doesn't ask them to manufacture peace before he acts. He meets them in the grief first. That is not incidental. That is the cure, showing up in a different form. Not stop being afraid, then I'll help. But, I see where you are. I'm here. Now watch. He walks to the tomb. He tells them to remove the stone. Martha, practical to the end, points out that the body has been there 4 days and the smell will be terrible. He tells her again, if she believes, she will see the glory of God. They remove the stone. He prays, one sentence, out loud, for the benefit of the people standing there. Then he shouts into the dark, Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus comes out, still wrapped in grave clothes, still blinking in the light, still smelling of the tomb, but standing. Here is what I want you to hold from this story as we move into the last section. Jesus allowed the situation to reach its worst possible point, not because he was absent, not because he was indifferent, because the cure he was about to demonstrate required the full weight of the disease. You cannot show that death has no final word if death has not yet spoken. The fear that comes from waiting, the fear that whispers that heaven is silent, that the friend isn't coming, that the stone is already rolled, that fear is not evidence that you have been abandoned. It is sometimes the setup for the most dramatic arrival possible. Pay attention to this, because the next story is not about someone else's fear. It is about his. We are in the garden now. The name is Gethsemane. It sits on the western slope of the Mount of Olives, just outside Jerusalem, across the Kidron Valley. The word itself means oil press, a place where olives are crushed to extract what is inside them. It is past midnight. The Passover supper is finished. The city is quiet. And Jesus has walked here with 11 men, asked 8 of them to sit and wait, and taken 3, Peter, James, and John, deeper into the trees. He tells the 3 what he is feeling. He doesn't hide it. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. That is not a figure of speech. He is telling them the literal state of his interior. Then he walks a little further, falls on his face in the dirt, and begins to pray. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Take it away. If there is another way, please. If there is any other path to what needs to happen, find it. Give it to me instead. This is not a man performing distress for an audience. The disciples are asleep. No crowd is watching. The prayer is raw and private, and it is the most honest thing in the New Testament. And here is the detail that medicine has spent centuries trying to understand. Luke, who was a physician, notes something the other gospel writers do not. He says that Jesus' sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. The condition has a name, hematidrosis. It is documented in medical literature, studied by forensic pathologists, including Dr. Frederick Zugibe, who spent decades examining the physiological evidence of the crucifixion. Hematidrosis occurs when extreme psychological stress causes the tiny capillaries surrounding the sweat glands to rupture. The blood seeps into the glands and is expressed through the skin along with sweat. It has been recorded in soldiers the night before battle, in prisoners the night before execution, in people facing the absolute limit of what the human mind can hold. It leaves the skin fragile, tender to the touch, raw. Jesus was not performing courage in Gethsemane. His body was doing what bodies do when fear has reached its outer edge. He was medically, physiologically, documentably terrified. And he stayed. He prayed the same prayer 3 times. 3 times he asked for another way. 3 times the answer from heaven was silence, or something that felt like silence, which is its own kind of answer. And after the 3rd time, he stood up, woke the disciples, said, "Rise, let us go. The one who betrays me is here." He walked toward it. This is the open loop from the beginning of this video, resolved. Not in the triumph of the resurrection, not in the miracle of Lazarus walking out of a tomb. Here, in a garden, in the dark, with blood on his face and dirt on his knees, and 11 men who are about to scatter. The one who told the disciples, "Why are you afraid?" on the boat, was afraid here. The one who walked toward the most broken man in the graveyard was broken here. The one who felt power go out to heal a woman's 12-year suffering was suffering here. He was not above it. He was inside it, fully, completely, with no performance, no shortcut, no divine exemption from what fear feels like in a human body at 2 in the morning. Now watch what happens next. Think about the last time you were genuinely, physically afraid. Not nervous, not anxious in the background. Afraid, the kind that wakes you up at 3 in the morning and sits on your chest. The kind that lives in a hospital waiting room under fluorescent lights while someone you love is on the other side of a set of double doors. and you cannot get to them, and you do not know what the doctor is going to say when he walks out. You know that moment. Most of us have been in it, or we will be. What do you actually do with that? Not what do you tell yourself to do. What do you do when the fear is that pure and that present, and every distraction has burned away? Augustine said our hearts are restless until they rest in God. But Augustine was not in a waiting room. He was not watching a monitor. He was writing in retrospect, from safety, with the benefit of resolution already in hand. Jesus was not writing in retrospect. Jesus was in the garden, asking the Father to find another way, and getting back something that felt like silence, and staying anyway. The cure is not the absence of fear. The cure is not faith strong enough that fear never comes. The cure is not positive thinking, or deep breathing, or telling yourself that statistically most things work out fine. The cure is this: a God who did not watch fear from a distance and tell you to handle it. A God who climbed down into the worst moment of human experience, the garden, the arrest, the trial, the nails, and went through it, not around it, through it, so that when you are in your version of Gethsemane, in your hospital waiting room, in your garden at midnight with blood on your face, you are not alone. In a place he has never been. You are alone in a place he went first. He sweated blood so that you would know, when the fear is that real, when the body does what bodies do under that kind of weight, he knows. Not theoretically, not theologically. He knows the way you know something that happened to your own skin. And after Gethsemane, he stood up. That is the cure, not the removal of fear. The presence of someone who has already been through it, and stood up, and is standing with you now. The disciples on the boat asked the right question, finally, after the storm went quiet. They looked at each other in the silence and said, "What kind of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The answer took 3 years to become fully clear. The kind of man who bleeds in a garden so that every terrified person who comes after him knows they are not in uncharted territory. He has been here. He knows the way out. 3 takeaways. Then we are done. The first one is a fact. Jesus never once told anyone to stop being afraid. Before he gave them a reason not to be. Not on the boat. Not in the graveyard. Not in the crowd where a woman was shaking. Not at a tomb where 2 sisters had been waiting 4 days. Not even in a garden where he himself was the one afraid. The command, "Fear not," in the mouth of Jesus, is never a cold instruction. It is always, always attached to presence. Fear not, for I am with you. Not fear not, because you are strong enough. Not fear not, because the odds are in your favor. Because I am with you. The cure is not a technique. It is a person. The second takeaway is personal. The move, the actual, practical, repeatable move, is not conquer your fear first, then act. It is reach while afraid. The bleeding woman pushed through a crowd while she was trembling. The man in the tombs ran toward Jesus while Legion was still screaming inside him. The disciples on the boat cried out while the water was still coming in. Not one of them had their fear under control before help arrived. Every single one of them moved toward him in the middle of it. That is not weakness dressed up as faith. That is exactly what faith looks like when it is real. And the storm is real and the boat is actually sinking. You reach, shaking, and you reach. The third takeaway, this is the one I want you to carry. He sweated blood. Not as a dramatic detail for a theology textbook. Not as a medical footnote in Luke's gospel. As evidence. Evidence that the one who says, "Do not be afraid," is not saying it from a safe distance. From a throne room insulated from what fear actually costs a human body. He said it from a garden, where his own capillaries were bursting. He said it from inside the experience, not above it. Which means that when you are in your worst moment, when the waiting room is cold, and the lights are too bright, and the doctor hasn't come out yet, and you are out of prayers, and out of composure, and your hands won't stop shaking, you are not in a place God observes from the outside. You are in a place he has already been. From the inside. He went there first. So you would never have to go alone. That is not a comfort designed to make you feel better. That is a fact embedded in the most honest prayer ever recorded. "Father, if there is another way, please." Followed by the most costly obedience ever performed. He stood up from that garden. And that changes everything about what standing up looks like for you. Before you go, I want to ask you one question, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments below. Which story in this video hit you hardest? The disciples on the boat, The man in the graveyard who ran. The woman who reached through the crowd. Mary and Martha waiting 4 days for a friend who didn't come. Or the garden. Tell me. I read every comment. I want to know where you are in this. Because you watched this video for a reason, and that reason matters. If this landed for you, share it with one person who needs it right now. You probably already know who that person is. And we will be back. There is still so much to look at.